Alberto Villoldo, my brother, it's so good to see you on this fourth consecutive year of the Earthkeepers Summit that you have created. I want to thank you for creating that. And I just want to tell you how much I appreciate your trust in sharing me with your community and the way that we get together and do this. I appreciate it very much, brother.
Thank you, Greg. It's great to be with you as well. As always, we've been together many, many years. And I've always been amazed at how not only contemporary, but how you're stepping into the future for us. You're really opening doorways for us personally and as a humanity to contemplate the dangers and opportunities that are facing us. And this is a very intense time of both of these. And I wonder if you could take us through a little bit of the navigation that you see for us as humans in the immediate future.
Wow, it's a big conversation, Alberto, and it's a very current conversation with the topics of AI, artificial intelligence, and transhuman agenda that is in the news. It's in the mainstream. We're seeing it every day. There is a movement, there is a concerted movement to replace our natural biology with synthetic technology, with chips in the brain, with chemicals in the blood, with artificial intelligence, making our decisions, and also making our creativity and our imagination for us in a way that we've never seen before. The technology, Alberto, has advanced so quickly since COVID. During a time of COVID, a lot of time and energy was poured into the development and the commercialization of technologies that were already available from military perspectives. You know, by the time we see something in the mainstream, it's already been developed and it's been implemented, typically in research in military circles. So,
yeah, for 20 years at least, you know, the military, then we get the second or third generation of that. So you're talking about the end of humanity, even possibly as we know it, huh?
Well, you know, I'm an optimist and I'm also a realist. And I believe if we're honest with ourselves, we have to say that we are truly at a crossroad. You know, you hear people say that all the time, and often it's a metaphor. This isn't a metaphor. And this is not going to drag on for year after year after year. Literally in this year and the following year, there are policies that are being implemented, laws that are being passed, practices that are being embraced in the medical community and through governmental organizations like the UN and others that are bringing technology not only into our lives, but into our bodies at a scale that we have never seen before. So we are truly at this crossroad where we must make a choice in terms of what we value when it comes to our biology. And just to kind of tell you where this is, there's a man named Ray Kurzweil, and I know many of our viewers are probably familiar with him. He's a visionary, a futurist. He's the head of engineering at Google. And Google is one of the pioneering corporations that are driving the AI technology. It's Google, Microsoft, and Tesla are the three that are driving this. And what Ray Kurzweil says very casually, he says, by the year 2035, he said, what we call pure humans will no longer exist. We will be a hybrid of natural biology and synthetic technology that will link us into what is being called the singularity, where we are part of a grid system, regulated, controlled, monitored. You know, we've all heard this and we've all seen this. And, you know, we've heard the conversations in the past about this, but now the technology and specifically the artificial intelligence is moving so quickly that those ideas that used to seem like science fiction have the potential of becoming a reality. Here's the catch. Everybody says, you know, I talk to young people, Alberto, and they say, what's the big deal? You know, what's the big deal if I get a chip in my brain that allows me to communicate with my computer without a wire? So what? here's what's being missed. And then this is where I think you and I really come together with the work that we do. When human biology is replaced with artificial technology, the functions, our natural functions, our immune response, for example, the way our neurons function, our cognitive capacities, our imagination, our creativity, all of those functions begin to atrophy if they are not used. This is the biological imperative: use it or lose it. And there are a number of studies that are now being published in mainstream tech journals showing the cognitive disabilities of young people who are spending hours with virtual reality visors, for example, or in front of a computer screen, or gaming, when it comes to their brain function, the size of their brain, thickening of the visual cortex, their inability to imagine and create the way they have in the past. They're losing social skills, social interaction of just communicating with another human in a kind way. So we're at a crossroad right now where we must make these choices, or we stand to lose. I don't think it's the end of humanity, but we could lose a species. We could lose a species very easily.
Mhm. Yeah, it's amazing to walk down the street and see a couple that are walking together and texting each other. They're communicating through their text messages. We're losing that human-to-human communication skill. Now, Ray Kurzweil wrote a book called The Age of Spiritual Machines. I don't know if you remember that book.
I do.
And he actually brought that date forward from 2035, maybe to even the late 2020s. And so this is happening so rapidly. And I remember watching a movie not too long ago in East Berlin about how the Secret Service was listening in on people. And I forget the name of the movie, but it took one Secret Service agent with headphones to listen into someone in another room with implanted microphones hidden somewhere. But today, technology can listen to everybody and can judge and make decisions and very rapidly follow. Our cell phones are active even if they're turned off. I'm amazed how I may be speaking with my wife about someone, and 2 days later, I get that image popping up on my phone, or that same afternoon. And so it's already happening very rapidly. And they're not gonna let us know. See, it's not gonna be, hi, this is Alberto's MacBook Pro. There's no individuality anymore. It's going to become this electronic one mind that is going to start, saying making decisions. There are automated systems in the military that are designed to fire missiles very rapidly without human interaction and any incoming threat. So this is so much bigger than we can imagine.
It is, Alberto, and for me, I'm a scientist. I'm a degreed earth scientist, a geologist with a strong background in the life sciences. I was a marine biology major to begin with before I went into marine geology, and then math, physics, computer science, and archaeology. And I say that because it's that multidisciplinary perspective that allows me to stay current with the new discoveries. I scan the tech journals, very complex journals that reveal the discoveries. It's no secret. They're publishing in very obscure scientific journals. The fact for example, this week, the FDA has just approved the Neuralink computer chip to be implanted into the human brain for testing purposes. Now FDA approved, that allows an individual to communicate with their computer through Bluetooth technology. So this isn't make-believe, and this isn't years down the road. So my thinking, I'm also a systems thinker. I tend to look at the big picture and the implications of the big picture. And the question that I ask myself is, what is it in our thinking, Alberto, and what is it in our society and our culture that makes this path possible? How have we arrived at this point? And it doesn't take long to understand. For at least 2 generations, our young people, you and I used to be those young people, and now our young people today are being taught that the human body is flawed, that carbon-based life is flawed by its very existence, and that because of those flaws, we need something outside of ourselves to compensate or to what they call fix the flaws. We need a savior. If we are victims of a flawed flawed biology, then we need a savior, and we're being told that the savior is the technology. So this is the thinking that is, even this moment, our young people, I have people that come to our events and they tell me that their children and their grandchildren in public schools are being taught that the human condition is flawed, and listen to what the flaws are. They're saying that our ability to have emotion is a flaw that can be fixed through technology. The flaw is that our emotion clouds our logic. It clouds the way that we make decisions. We're being told that human reproduction, intimate human physical contact, is flawed because it's unknown what the outcome will be. Maybe you have good genes, maybe you have genes that produce results you don't want, but that's okay because technology can fix that flaw. And so the thinking is that human intimacy is now becoming obsolete because we can create precisely the life with precisely the characteristics that we want through gene editing. And these are just two examples of what our young people are being taught.
Well, I can give you another example. I remember when I was a young man, when I was a boy, I remembered every one of my friends' telephone numbers. And today, I can't even remember my own telephone number. We transfer these memory functions to our cell phones, to digital devices that remind us of that we can look up at any time that we want, any event in history. We don't need to recall facts anymore. So beginning to transfer our memory functions to technology, and eventually we're going to be, like you're saying, the technology is proving to be more efficient at all these flawed human traits that supposedly we have.
Well, yes and no, but here's two things that are being overlooked. And first, I'm going to step back. I want to just mention Ray Kurzweil again, because I don't want people to think he's a bad man, and I don't believe that he's a bad man. I don't know him personally. I see him featured in the books and certainly in the media. He's a very visible face in the media, but I work with people who have worked with him directly. Yeah. And what they say is he is what you would call a techie. He is a tech junkie or a tech nerd in some respects. He is focused on the technology and pushing that technology as far as he can push it. When he's asked, what are the social implications of what you're doing? What he says is, I don't know. He says, it's above my pay grade. You know, yeah. You have to talk to someone else. He says, I am just telling you where we're going with the technology. So I'll just give you an example. There was a study that was published in the New England Journal of Medicine in late 22, and I'm writing a new book. And this is why I know about this study. I came across this study. I'm writing a book about these topics. And what they showed is that for young children now, 3 to 4 to 5 years of age, they have studied their relationship to technology. So they get up in the morning and they eat their Captain Crunch breakfast, or whatever it is they're going to have for breakfast. And their parents want to entertain them. So they will sit them in the living room and put a virtual reality visor on these young minds, these impressionable minds. And remember, it's the age 1 to 7 where our mind is absorbing our external environment like a sponge. We don't have the filters to know how to gauge and how to determine, what's good for us. So these young people, they put on the visors, and what they experience, Alberto, are these vivid colors that they would never see in the world in their backyard. Vivid sounds and experiences and situations of animals and people and maybe dinosaurs or space exploration, and that they would never explore in their real lives. But here's the catch. Here's what's happening. They are observing all of these things happening around them rather than using their imagination and their creativity, rather than stimulating the brain cells at the developmental level where they need to engage with those cells. And here's what the science is showing. Our brain is constantly producing new neurons. We used to think that it was a fixed number at birth. Now we know that up until our last breath on this planet, we are producing new brain cells. However, those brain cells must be engaged in a meaningful way within 14 days of the time they are created, or they will atrophy and they will die. So what's happening is the young people now at an early age, they're recording a thickening of the visual cortex because that is the part of their brain that's being stimulated, but they are losing the ability to create, the ability to imagine. The neurons are not connecting. It's stunting their ability to imagine and create, as well as all the other things we said, the interaction and the social skills and things like that. And that's one study of the young people, but that principle applies across the board. Use it or lose it. When we put chemicals in our bodies that are trying to mimic the function that our body already does, and the immune system is a perfect example. If we do not use the natural system, our biology says, oh, you've got something else doing this, I don't have to do it. And we begin to lose, the term is atrophy. Our systems, our vital systems begin to atrophy, whether it's reproduction, whether it's the immune response, cognitive abilities. And this is what is being missed by the technologists. And there's no regulation. So we are at this crossroad. Ray Kurzweil says we will be a hybrid species within our lifetimes, however many years that is. Once that happens, Alberto, once our systems atrophy within our bodies, then in the next generation, we pass that signal on through the genome, and the body says, oh, these are appendages of functions that we used to need, but we no longer need them. And this is how you lose a species. This is how we lose our humanness. The very experiences that we cherish as a species that set us apart from all other forms of life, we stand to lose in a single generation. And this, I'm very passionate about this. And this is why the new programs that I offer in the world, they're called Pure Human, because we're about to lose the gifts of our humanness before we even know what it is that we're giving away. We do not know the full extent of our human capacity, and we, not you and I, not our community, but the powers that be, the technocracy, is willing to give those powers away before we even know what it is that we're giving away. And that's been on my mind a lot. And I think
I know. Greg, both you and I spend quite a bit of time in Peru and working with indigenous people. I know you traveled the world working with original peoples, and in many of these among many of these peoples, there are prophecies about this point, this crossroads that we're in right now, where humanity can take a quantum leap for the positive to become an extraordinary human, or we can go the other direction, which is what you're talking about here. Tell us, what are some of the possibilities, what kind of human can we become if we not go the route of technology, but go the more spiritual path that you and I are so interested in?
Well, I think this may be the way that science learns, Alberto, because some of the technologies that are being pushed, like cloning, for example, they can only be successful to a certain point, and there's a dead end, and they can't go any further. And the reason that they can't go any further is, and this is true of many of the transhuman propositions as well, is because to mimic in technology the functions of the human body, we must understand ourselves. And the science now is at a point where they know just enough to begin to mimic those functions, but they don't know enough about the body to know how to fully implement them. And the only way to be successful in the technology is they're going to have to understand who we are to a greater depth, a greater degree. I mean, I'll just give you an example of this. I was at a live event. You and I were together at a conference just recently with Hay House in Florida. And it was right after that, I was speaking to a young man, not in the venue, but in the hallway. And he was asking me, what is the big deal, again, about a chip in the brain? Or, if we can enhance ourselves, what's the problem with that? He hadn't thought about the atrophying, but then I shared this with him. Chips in the brain, are they fast? Absolutely. Computer chips are absolutely fast. Are they efficient? Absolutely. But here's what's being missed. Those computer chips are limited by the materials, the physics of the materials they are made of. So a computer chip can only transfer information as fast as the information can move between the atoms of the silica, for example, if that's what they're being used. So you reach a limit and the chips are not scalable. Now, when you come to the soft technology of the human body, we're not computer chips and wires and sensors and chemicals. We are neurons and cell membranes and ion potentials moving across the cell walls. And when it comes to our potential, we don't know our potential for this reason, because we are scalable. Our cells and our neurons are designed to constantly adapt and upgrade to accommodate greater and greater challenges, greater amounts of information, greater stresses to the body in a way that a computer chip cannot. We are a highly advanced, technologically sophisticated, soft technology that mysteriously appeared on Earth 200,000 years BP, before present, is what we call anatomically modern humans. And our indigenous ancestors have very, very good memories of how this happened and what it means. When we look at the genome, what we find, Alberto, is our genome is not the product of random processes, random mutations. There's an intentionality underlying the way that our genome is put together. And then the kicker is when we compare the fossilized genome of our ancestors, the earliest anatomically modern humans, to us today, we haven't changed in that 200,000 years. And what that means, that's not Darwin's idea of evolution. And it means that we are wired for the times that we're living in right now. We're wired for resilience, we're wired for change. But the only way that we're going to accommodate this change in a healthy way is we've got to step up our game. We've got to embrace the potential that lives within us. And this is the beauty of the indigenous traditions. And you and I both, we spend a lot of time in the Andes, certainly in the deserts with the Bedouin. I've spent a lot of time in Tibet and India and Nepal and all through the desert Southwest and the Aboriginals in Australia. And as different as they are from one another, the common theme, they didn't know the technological terms and the science that we now understand today. They understood the principles and they applied those principles. So for example, science for 300 years has been trying to prove whether or not everything is connected. Our ancestors began with the understanding, they said, of course, everything is connected. So rather than spending 5,000 years trying to prove that connection, what they did was they learned how to apply that connection in their bodies, in their lives, in their families, in their societies, so that they could meet the challenges of the world in a healthy way. So this is the beautiful place, and you and I cross this bridge because we're both scientists and we embrace the wisdom of our ancestors. So the science gives us the nuts and bolts of how things work. The wisdom of our ancestors tells us how to apply that knowledge in our lives. And we benefit from the best of those two worlds if we love ourselves enough to allow that wisdom into our lives.
Precisely, precisely. Let me go back to the science for a moment, Greg. The human, you know that early on in my career, I directed a small neuroscience lab at San Francisco State University. We were studying to see if we could create the brain, to see if we could create psychosomatic health. But that's another story. The chip inside the brain is a digital chip, but the human nervous system has a digital component, which is the primary transmission in the neuron, but also an analog component, which is the myelin sheath, which communicates information in an analog way. So with the chip implant, you can make yes or no logical decisions, but you don't have the gray areas. You don't have the analog. You don't have the maybe it happened, maybe it didn't happen. Everything becomes black and white. We become totally digital humans. I've met Ray Kurzweil. We've spoken, and he. One of the things that he was working on was recreating his father digitally because he lost his father when he was very young. So he has these amazing archives of everything, every photograph, every letter, every communication, to recreate him digitally. He is a really good guy. He's a visionary, and he's reporting on where the technology is going, he's been part of it, but he's also, what I find is very concerned about the directions that and the implications for the future of humanity, the things that you're bringing up. But I wanted to ask you to take us back to what happened 200,000 years ago when the human chromosome, when we got it, that triggered the awakening and the development of the neocortex. I know you spent a lot of time describing that. Can you cover it for us quickly?
Yeah, I'm excited, not just happy, I'm excited to do that because so many people, I still run into so many people who are not aware of what we're going to say right now. So I want to begin very clearly. I'm a degree geologist. I believe in evolution. Evolution is a fact. I've seen it for myself in the fossil record of plants, insects, animals. If we're going to solve the problems of the world today, how can we solve the problems if we're not honest about the problems? And part of that honesty is being honest about the data and the science. If science is going to serve us, we have to keep science honest. And so where that applies to evolution, evolution is a fact. It breaks down when it comes to us. We are called anatomically modern humans, abbreviated AMH in the text. We appeared mysteriously about 200,000 years ago, 200,000 years before present. And that date, interestingly enough, is completely accepted and agreed upon in the scientific literature. There's no problem with the date of our emergence. The controversy is what happened to get us here. How did we appear? And the beauty of technology, Alberto, is that we now can go back into the fossilized remains of the oldest examples of us, and we can pull the DNA from the bone marrow of the fossilized remains. It sounds like science fiction. This is what the movie Jurassic Park was actually based upon. The really good Jurassic Park, the first one.
Yeah.
And except in the movie, they reconstituted the genome. To the best of my knowledge, we have not done that successfully, but you and I know somebody's working on it in the basement of a secret lab somewhere. They're trying to reconstitute. But yeah, but what happens? So we're able to now rebuild the genome of our earliest ancestors and compare it to us today. And one of the first things that happened is it was very clear we did not descend from Neanderthal, for example. We shared the earth, we walked the earth with them, and we actually interbred with them. They said we had Neanderthal boyfriends and girlfriends.
Yeah.
So if we walked the earth with them, we did not descend from them. But then we begin looking at the genome and the mystery, and there are a number of genetic mutations that the scientific community acknowledges cannot happen through natural evolutionary processes. There was a Proceedings in National Academy of Sciences, the volume is called Genetics, clearly identified one of these, and it's one I talk about frequently. It's human chromosome number 2. It's the second largest chromosome in the human body. It takes up about 8% of all the DNA in our nucleus, but it's a very unusual chromosome because it is the fusion, a mysterious fusion of two pre-existing chromosomes. And not only a fusion, Alberto, but after the fusion happened, there were genes that were added, genes that were taken away, and the term is silenced. There are genes that were silenced to stabilize that and optimize that fusion. It gave us a little over 1,200 genes in that chromosome. One of those genes is called TBR1. TBR1 is responsible for the neocortex that we have today. It's 76% larger than our nearest primate relative. And it's in that neocortex where we find the mirror neurons, for example, that allow our body super learning. The mirror neurons don't know the difference between watching and experiencing. So when we see something happen, our brain thinks it's happening to us, and it begins to trigger the chemical response as if it were happening to us. Now, we all know this. You know, if you're sitting on the couch on a Sunday afternoon watching soccer, you're sitting there, but your body can be tense and perspiring and your heart's racing because your mirror neurons are watching those guys or those girls on the field. But now think about this. If your mirror neurons are watching the healing that happens from a shamanic ceremony or from an indigenous perspective, or if your mirror neurons see the healing that you imagine in your mind's eye, your mirror neurons don't know the difference between watching and having the experience. So this is why it's so important how we think of ourselves and perceive ourselves, because we're literally, what are we feeding the mirror neurons? This is what you have to ask yourself. What am I feeding my mirror neurons? Am I seeing myself as whole and complete and vital and fully enabled and fully capacitated? Or do I focus on what are often perceived as the flaws or the imperfections that we're programmed to accept in society? Because either way, those mirror neurons are going to tell the brain to release the chemistry in the body that matches that image. Where did we get that? We don't know where chromosome 2 came from. It is not the product of natural evolution, and it happened 200,000 years ago when we appeared. Now, if that was the only one, you could say, well, maybe it's a fluke, but it's not. Chromosome number 7. I'm a musician when I'm not doing what I'm doing. I was a musician long before I was ever an author. That's my plan B. If the whole author gig doesn't work out, I've got a plan B to go on tour. So one of the questions as a musician, I always ask, and a scientist, I ask myself, is when you look at the chimpanzee, we share 98% of their DNA. That's a lot. But you will never hear a chimpanzee sing Led Zeppelin's Stairway to Heaven. And you ask, why is that? And the answer is, it's a mind blower, because there was a little genetic shift. Two DNA letters were swapped that connect our brain and our jaw and our tongue in a way that gives us the ability to have complex speech like we have now, and to sing. It happened to no other primates. It's called the FOXP2 gene in chromosome number 7. This gene was stable, Alberto, for over 75 million years. It didn't shift in any primates. All of a sudden, this little tweak happened that gave us the ability to communicate and sing like we do now, and it happened 200,000 years ago, precisely the time that chromosome 2 was fused, and when we emerged as anatomically modern humans. And those are two examples. There are others. Those are two examples.
Was that an accident, Greg? Or would
So
that
that,
mean,
you're going right where I'm going, because statistically, scientists say if the odds of something happening are 1 in 10 to the 400th power, so 10 with 400 zeros, if the odds are 1 in 10 to 400, science calls that impossible. When they do the mathematics for the possibilities of the DNA occurring the way it has, the odds are 1 in 600 that could have happened. That means it's more than impossible that this is a fluke, that it is random. There is an intentionality. Now, as a scientist, I have to say that there is an intentionality, and I believe that the evidence, the archaeological evidence, the anthropological evidence, the genetic evidence, the cultural records, and the social records all suggest some kind of intelligent intervention. And that's a whole conversation that may not be supported 100% by science. The genetic aspect is definitely supported by science. These mutations did not happen randomly. There's an adage, an idiom in evolutionary science that says nature never over-endows. Now, what that means is that an organism will acquire characteristics only when it needs them to survive. It doesn't just acquire them to acquire them. You and I, in our community, we showed up on this planet 200,000 years ago with capabilities light years beyond what we needed to survive. And we're 200,000 years ago, and we're only beginning to tap those potentials: super learning, super memory, super cognition, the ability to self-regulate our immune system, the ability to self-regulate our longevity enzymes, the ability to self-regulate our resilience to a changing world. Man, who doesn't want that? The world is changing faster than we can document in our textbooks. All of those things are part of our heritage. Some intelligence, someone or something gave us the ability to do all of these things so that we can thrive, not just survive, thrive through this shift of the ages. And we are on the precipice of giving those gifts away to technology in one generation if we don't recognize and embrace what was given to us. The ability to live pure human, I think, is front and center for all of us right now. So it's a long answer to a short question.
Well, that's a beautiful description. Let me add a little color to it, because apes have 48 chromosomes. Humans have 46. We have 23 pairs, one from mother, one from father. That's why we cannot breed with the apes. But what happened with chromosome number 2 is that suddenly you have a fusion that occurred. At the end of chromosomes, you have telomeres. They're kind of like what keeps the chromosomes from fraying. They're like the plastic at the end of your shoelace. And they're at the end of the chromosome. But number 2, you have the chromosomes at the end, plus 2 of them in the middle, where they normally don't belong, showing that there was a fusion that occurred. Nobody knows how, like you point out, 200,000 years ago, that allowed for the development of the neocortex, the higher brain, for music, for quantum physics, for even the terrible potentials that we have to hijack our biology today, like you're pointing out. Amazing, magical, extraordinary, inexplicable event that gave us all these amazing capabilities. And what can we do, Greg? What can we do to bring in this neurocomputer, to make it more active, to really run the higher software that the hardware is allowing us to do? What do you suggest?
It's a good question, Alberto, and it's technology. As a scientist, I see this conversation all the time. There are two schools of thought. One group of, I used to see this when I worked in the industry. I was a senior computer systems designer during the Cold War years on a project that was called SDI, Star Wars Defense Initiative. And I met brilliant scientists from many different disciplines, and we would gather around the coffee machine, or the water machine, and have these conversations. And there was one school of science that said, and scientists that said, if we were never meant to do these things, we would never have been given the ability to figure out how to do these things. And another school of scientists said, not so fast. Just because we can doesn't mean that we should. And what would always come from those conversations is the technology isn't good or bad or right or wrong. It's the thinking underlying the technology and how it's applied. Unfortunately, a lot of technology is driven during times of war with, unlimited finances, and then the applications kind of sift out during peacetime. So that's, I think, where the technology is now. And I don't want to demonize the technology. I believe the AI can serve us and help us to navigate through the challenges of the shift that we're going through right now, the breakdowns in climate, the breakdowns in energy, the breakdowns in the financial system. If those technologies, it's all about how they're applied. And the AI is a perfect example. The AI is programmed with algorithms that reflect our bias, the bias of the programmers. So as we become more neutral and more honest in our algorithms, the AI is going to have less of a bias. In our everyday lives, I think we can keep these things in mind and say, we're at a crossroad where these amazing technologies, we can invite them to serve us, or we can allow them to enslave us. And this is where we have to come to terms with our story. And the story that we have been fed is that we are flawed beings by virtue of our existence, that we are powerless victims of a world that we have no control over, and we need something outside of ourselves to save us. That's the story. I think what we begin to do, Alberto, is as adults, for ourselves, we honestly look at a new story. We write a new story for ourselves. And our children, we inform our children of the beauty and the blessing of our humanness and what it means to be human and the potential that we have and how it sets us apart from all other forms of life. I think one of the important things is to look at the potential and then look at the implementation. The implementation of our human capabilities right now, in many respects, is flawed. We're using our intellect and we're using our creativity and our imagination to hurt other people and to destroy this planet. That's the implementation, but the potential is still pure. The potential of what it is that we have. I'm beating around the bush. I'm going to share just a quick story. I have a number of friends who I also know you know as well, that are therapists working in a field of abductees, UFO abductions, which is a global phenomenon. I toured with John Mack back in the 1990s before he passed, validating this phenomenon across cultures, across nationalities, across nations of people that are having these abduction experiences. And almost universally, when they are abducted, they will ask their abductees, the aliens or whoever it is that has taken them, they'll ask a question, why did you take me? And what do you want from me? And what is cataloged now it's just a mind blower. And it's so relevant to what we're talking about now, because almost every one of those abductions, what the people are told is that we as humans, our species is at a crossroads now that the abductors were a long time ago in their history, where we either retain our biology or we give it away and follow the path of the machines and the technology. And they made a choice that they regret. They regret giving their biology away. They regret losing their emotion. They regret the ability to have intimacy and reproduction, and they want that back. And they're cautioning us not to make the same mistake in our lifetime, in our point in civilization right now. So whether we believe that or not, it certainly is an invitation from another perspective to really look at how we use technology in our lives. You know, I'm back in the 1970s when I was going to Florida Institute of Technology, FIT, and it's where I was developing all of my math skills. And it was during that time that a company called Texas Instruments came out with a gadget called a handheld calculator. They were very pricey.
That's really dating you, Gregg.
I know. Well, it's because we were using.
I remember that. I still know how to use a slide ruler, you know?
I was going to say, we were all using the slide rules before that, and most people don't even know what that is. But here's the thing. The technology wasn't good, bad, right, or wrong, but it became very controversial. Are students allowed to have that calculator in their hand when they're taking the math test, when they're taking, integral, differential equations? Can you use a calculator or whatever it is you're going to do? And of course, now we don't give it a second thought, but look at what's happened. Many people, if they don't have that calculator, they no longer know how to do that math. They don't know how to do the formula for, integral calculus or analytic geometry or something like that. We've lost on a large scale, we've lost the ability to do those things without the machine to help us. And I think we can look at the very same thing. When we're about to use a machine, ChatGPT is a perfect example. If we allow ChatGPT to write our books and to create our poetry and to write our music and to create our art, yeah, it can be cool and it can be fun. And I think we all get that. But ultimately, if we stop engaging our own creativity, our own imagination, our own kinesthetic skills of writing letters on a piece of paper or even typing with our fingers, if ChatGPT is doing all that for us, how much of ourselves, this is the question, I think it's the answer to your question. We have to ask ourselves every day, how much of myself am I willing to give away to the technology? Or another question is, do I love myself enough to embrace and develop the abilities that were given to me 200,000 years ago by a greater intelligence, whatever we think that is? And can I embrace those out of the love of what it means to create and to imagine? Or am I embracing the technology out of the fear of what happens if I don't? The fear of not writing a book that's good enough, or not writing a poem, or not having art as good as the technology. What is the foundation of the choice? Am I choosing out of the love for what's possible or the fear of what happens if I don't? And I think that's a question that we can all ask ourselves every day and act upon in each moment of each day of our lives.
Well, that's a huge thought that you're offering to us, Gregg, and I love that about you. You're really the prophet of this incredible moment that we're facing historically as humans, and I'm so grateful that you're bringing this to the forefront of our attention. This is such important information because your personal choices each one of us can make. Do we retain our humanity? Do we retain our creativity? Do we retain our inspiration, or do we give that power away? Wow. Thank you so much, dear Gregg. It's like always such a pleasure and a treat to be with you. Thank you for sharing your wisdom with us. And I so look forward to our next time together.
Alberto, I want to thank you again for the invitation to contribute to the Wisdom Keepers series. I want to thank Unity for making it all possible. And I just want to thank just take a moment, thank everyone watching. Thank you for doing everything you can do to be the best version of your human self and to create the best world possible. We love you all, and I look forward to our next.